These athletes are incredible. The adversity that they have gone through to train and to be there and to basically what they've gone through just to be there and to become a professional is different than men. It's different. It's not any, I think male athletes are incredible. I love NFL football. I'm there for it. I love it. But the women have those stories and have the same challenges. And there's actually so much in common when you look at it. The life stories that you hear about in the NFL and the NBA, in men's sports, and you look at the female athletes coming up who are now professional, they have stories to tell too that people want to hear. And I think just getting these CEOs and these people out to women's sporting events and then seeing all their customers who paid a ticket to be there need to have the presence there, they'll see it.
Tami Powers, I am super excited to have this conversation with you because, as we just talked about, you have a very pioneering role inside women's sport, specifically motorsport, but it's growing. And I would like to start by asking you, what mission are you on?
Oh, God, when I wake up in the morning, my mom would tell you, did you feel that? Like the earth moving? My mission is very, very vast, and I have a lot of energy that I put into what I do every day. I am one person, but I am forceful. Sometimes I need to back off a little bit, but my mission every single day is to facilitate opportunities for female race car drivers. We don't have any female race car drivers that are competing regularly in the highest forms and disciplines in motorsport. There are no women in Formula One. There are very few in IndyCar, and if they are there, they're usually just running the 500. They're not running the entire schedule like their competitors. NASCAR, no one in the NASCAR Cup Series. And so my goal and my mission every day is to really facilitate opportunities, seat time, facilitating partnerships for females in motorsport.
When we think about motorsport in the US versus anywhere else in the world, F1 in Europe seems to be quite a significant pastime. In Australia, we dabble with it. We have some motorsport, but I wouldn't say it's a deep industry. In the United States, there are multiple tiers. It seems like, I don't think it's unfair to say it's a national pastime. How did you come into motorsport, and what is that passion there? Because I know it does go beyond motorsport, but what was that passion that brought you there?
So looking back at my life, I never thought I'd end up in motorsport. I was a young girl growing up in Michigan, rural Michigan, and I had an older brother who was tinkering with his street cars and, racing them at Martin, Michigan. And, one of the big things in the United States is, we'd rather have the kids racing safely on a track versus street racing illegally and causing harm to others. So
Right.
The National Hot Rod Association has been a very, very big champion of getting kids off the streets and getting them on the track. The NHRA is the largest sanctioned body in the United States, and it's drag racing. And so I never knew it, but I would end up there as Alan Johnson as my first hire in motorsports, who is arguably the best crew chief in the world, 14 world titles now. Mm-hmm. And he and I've worked together for the past 24 years. So I was lucky enough to meet him in the beginning, but going way, way back to Michigan, I always tell young people that I mentor, it's like, really pay attention to your life and pay attention to events in your life when you're really young, because they mean something in the ladder, right? And you look back and you go, I had no idea that's what that meant. So there was a time when I was in high school, I think it was around 8th grade, and you could do elective classes. Like you could take all of your classes that you had to take, like math and science and social studies, but you had elective classes that you could do, and they had a automotive shop class. So I had been following my brother around, watching him, work on these cars. And I signed up for the class because I wanted to impress him and like know what I was talking about when he was working on his car. And I signed up for the class and I was so excited. And that morning, it was like Christmas morning. I wanted to get in there. It was the first class of the day. And I walked in and the room just fell silent when I walked in. And I was like, am I in the right place? Like, what's going on? And the lump in my throat started with like, what is she doing here? Mm-hmm. Why is she here? And looking back, I know it was a cultural sociology. I don't know, but why is a girl in here? So I sat through the class and I remember being just sick, just sitting there. I can't run away. I can't move my body. I was so tense. And I didn't know what that meant until later on in life. And I wanted, I have a daughter. And one day she came home from kindergarten and I said, your birthday's coming up. What do you want? And she said, well, I want a dinosaur, but I can't have one because only boys play with dinosaurs. And I went, oh my God, this is still happening.
Yeah.
All these years later. So my mission every day is to, like I said, facilitate those opportunities for women because I know what it felt like not being wanted there. And I think women are great engineers. Women are great fighter pilots. Women are great at so many things. And there shouldn't be any hurdles that if they do the work and they're good at what they do and they have the talent, they deserve a seat at the table.
I could not agree with you more. Like everything here that we're talking about expands so broadly and deeply in so many different parts of society. In sport, as we talked about before, and in Australia, the most meteoric recent rise is around football, women's soccer, and the team here have been fighting like all women's sport have been doing for so long, fighting for enough attention and enough mindshare of spectators to understand what was going on. And recently in the World Cup, which was hosted here, we had this very incredible image, which was, I think, only about 10 or 15 years ago, where it showed a photograph of Matilda's game being played in one of our major stadiums. Mm-hmm. And the major stadium hadn't really been completed yet. Mm-hmm. And then fast forward, they took another photo when it was completely packed out. And it was just because the world decided to pay more attention and because these athletes had just worked tirelessly in their support crews and their teams. And we always say it takes a village to do these things, but it was such a lift that everybody in the country finished the World Cup. And it was one of those nation-changing moments, which we can only hope finds its way into all other sports as well. So I am completely with you on the mission that you're on. I think it's super impressive. Let me go trackside for a second. Sure. In my experience with motorsport, one thing that is often very pronounced is on the driver and the crew outfits, on the vehicles themselves, stickers and patches, and there are brands seemingly everywhere that sit inside this. And I imagine that you are somebody who is, being a concierge of sorts to try and bring more of those patches to the outfit. And those patches can be very expensive patches, as it turns out, when you think about the sponsorship number. Tell me a little bit about how that world works, because obviously multiple teams, multiple tiers of this sport, there's a lot of money flowing into this sport, and it's an expensive sport. So how does this dynamic around brands coming together for teams and for drivers and for crews work, just for people that don't understand anything about motorsport?
So you're right. I mean, if you look around, it's all about the patches and the logos. But what has happened over the years is it's what happens beyond the logos, what happens behind the logos, what happens behind the scenes. There's a lot of B2B going on at a racetrack. Whenever you go to any racetrack, it's like-minded individuals doing business with each other. And it's really helping the growth of your B2B partner. It's fan engagement, it's innovation. We had a partnership for many decades with Toyota in the NHRA, and they would take the data from the engines, especially when a race car would crash. Mm-hmm. And they would take that data and they'd use that and make impactful changes to their safety protocols in regular consumer automotive, right? And so the innovation, the technology, all these partnerships serve a big purpose in the bigger picture. So I look at all the logos and I'm like, why is that one there? Because some of them are like, what are they doing in there? How does it make sense? And then I go, oh, they're doing business with this company. They're doing business with that company. And you look at such a large field of competitors in NASCAR, and you look at Kroger and all their different brands that are there, and you look at a lot of CPG in NASCAR. Well, it's about, hey, if we bring this brand in and we get this shelf space at this store, we are in the direct eyesight of the consumer, and it's really a lot of business posturing, if you want to call it that. And it's like, you look at the NASCAR demographic and you go, I don't think these 40 to 50-year-old men are buying this product at Kroger. It's not them. Okay. So it's a very tightly wound web of different B2B opportunities that are happening because the sport is very, very expensive. Yes. And so how do I fit Power Drive, what I do on the daily, into something like that? What I do is I go over to the mid-cap businesses and I say, hey, you're not in motorsports yet, you should be. Let me help you navigate that. And it's a smaller investment. It's still always six figures in motorsports, but it's a opportunity to do it differently. Because there's an old guard that is running a lot of this stuff. And I'm like, what does the next generation look like? What do my daughter's generation, what are they looking for? And her and I collaborate a lot. I said, what's important to you when you want to purchase something? What is, and I think what that is lacking in the generation before me is that they don't listen. They don't research the way I do. And we're so data driven now. I don't even think people really dig into it that far in the generation before me. And what I do is lead with the data. And when they say, why should we invest in women's sports? And I say, well, $31.8 trillion of discretionary spending that women have the power over. That's why we need to have some thought starters and think about why it's important for you to invest.
When we talk about partnerships, it's quite a romantic term often. We use the term partnership in many different aspects of life. In the context of this show and my work, it's really about helping business leaders understand, how do you collapse the time to create fantastic partnerships and ones which make financial relevant sense to both parties over a strategic period, not over a 1 year period, but over multiple years. The playbook that you use to try and break down into those brands and then introduce new brands, or maybe even reformat the way that some brands engage with motorsport. Can we dive into some of the detail around that so that we can sort of help a number of the listeners who are CEOs trying to work out how am I supposed to bring my company into the new light of what the power of a partnership can actually do for a business?
Well, I think the first challenge that I see is the CEO. The CEO could love motorsports, but he still needs, or she needs, buy-in from the team, because you spend a lot of time in that space. And if you don't like it and you don't love being there, then you're not going to like to go to work every day. So it's really finding the sweet spot with the company that is aligned in the passion. You got to be aligned in the passion, because it is a lot of work. And there's a lot of navigation. There's lots of logistics. There's lots of travel. And so that's the first thing you do. If you like, State Farm is a very big insurance company here, and they
Mhm.
invest, I mean, just obscene amounts of money in sport, but they do not align with motorsport. They will tell you, yes, we're cheering the women on, but they don't invest in motorsport. Neither do airlines. They'll tell you, we don't want to see our logo crashing and burning on a racetrack. I get it.
Yep.
But so for me, it's all in the research and figuring out who has the fire in their belly like I do
Mm.
for the sport. And then once you have that, then you get the team's buy-in, then you have the long-term relationships. And then it's really about creating a roadmap for success and growth for the brand. Because if they're not seeing results and they're not seeing year over year growth, then it doesn't make sense for their business. And so then the CEO obviously would have a board to answer to, shareholders or whatever. So there's so many intricate pieces that need to fit perfectly. But when you get that beautiful marriage of a partnership,
Mhm.
it's long, long, long lasting.
Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting as well because, and you touched on this idea of progress momentum inside a partnership. We see many partnerships fail, and often they fail for a range of reasons, one of which is the intention at the beginning of a partnership is not well understood. People will say that they've had a lot of conversations and we're all on the same page, but my underlying assumption with just about every conversation I enter into is that people are tired and overwhelmed. So their capacity to sort of understand all the information and make sense of it is very difficult to do given all the competing priorities that are happening. And so when we think about one of the crowning parts of a great partnership, it's that they've been able to achieve a really significant win in the first 6 months of that partnership, which is usually architected into the deal in a quiet kind of way so that everybody knows that success is going to be experienced very quickly in order to give that partnership credibility within the first 6 months. So tell me a little bit about what you're looking for in terms of that sort of first win in order to get that credibility in the motorsport game, because you're right. CEOs and boards, they're looking for a return on investment. And the sooner that they can feel proud about something, they'll talk about it, because rarely do CEOs have great news to talk about. So there's going to be some good things for them to say. How do you sort of think about that going into a new relationship and trying to set them up for success?
So I think one of the mistakes that I think everyone makes at some point, and especially motorsports partnerships or any sports partnerships, is you feel though you sign this great partner, you've got the financial stability you need to train, to test, to perform. And I can tell you that I've known several race car drivers, in particular men, who never won a race, but they have the same sponsor their entire career. They've come close. They've, you can't win them all. You can't win 20% of them most of the time. So it's like, what does winning mean? So I sat down with
Excellent.
one of the
Such a great
gentlemen and I
question.
said,
Yeah.
how does this, you have the same sponsor for 25 years. You won one race. Like, how did you do this? And he goes, Tami, it's all about the experience you give them. It's the experience that they have. It's the lifelong memories that they bring their kids out to a race. They get to sit in the car. They get to be in an exclusive space and be celebrated for being there. And I think there's so much more to this partnership than meets the eye when it comes to how do you fulfill your obligations and your promises to your partners. And I think it means 100 different things. And it just depends on the partner. It's like everyone is different. Marketing is like dating. It's like asking someone on a date. And your branding is why they say yes.
Yeah. That is so true. And it's interesting. I remember the first time, I must have been 9 years old when I first stepped onto a track. And as a former pilot, it had a very similar feel to it. There was a fuel scent, there was noise, there was big toys, there was just this electric coordination of people and activities going on where you just can't help but you're just be excited about what's going on. And I can see why engaging somebody beyond the brand to bring them trackside, to help them understand all those things can be absolutely intoxicating. How do you take that? And you mentioned before, we've got CEOs or senior executives that might love this idea. They might have been brought up into it. They can't stop talking about it. What is a great way to then extend that into the broader organization? So people who might be on the front line or people at middle management can sort of go, I get why we're doing this now. I thought it was just another CEO whim, but this feels kind of cool to me. How do you try to help those organizations get to that point? Is it just inviting them to trackside to try and give them a semi similar kind of experience?
The first thing that I focus on is the athlete. And if you are lucky enough to work with athletes that are likable, marketable, super smart, super driven, grit, talent, that when you have somebody that checks all those boxes, it's like to bring a corporation or a small business or a company or whoever into that world, like you said, being around the sights, the sounds, the smells, it's so large. It's larger than life.
Yeah.
To bring a company into that and to bring them into the story, right? It starts with the company. It starts with the people, the stakeholders. When you bring them into the story, and the stories must be authentic, when you bring them into that world, everything comes into place. The fan engagement, they're like, this brand is here, and they're telling these types of stories. They're not just slapping a logo on a car and, not weaving themselves into the fabric of the stories. And I think that once you connect all of that, when you see that beauty happen, and it's happened to me a few times now, I'm like, oh, I just got it right.
Yeah.
And it takes, just like a race car driver could race all year and not get a podium and then finally get a podium. It's like that feeling. That's what I get when I put the right partnerships together. It's something that, a CEO will write me a note and go, you did it, kid. You got it right. And that's, my payoff. That's my podium, right?
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. Exactly the same way. That's fantastic. So let's dive into that a little bit. Tell me a little bit about some of the partnerships that stay in your mind as being just that fantastic pairing, and maybe some of the factors that came to life to make it just so good.
I think going way back, the Toyota partnership was something that I had no idea would be so intricate and innovative and really sort of give a bird's eye view of the technology behind automotive and how we were a big part of that. And that partnership saved lives. I mean, it gave the data that they needed for safety, for our kids in the car, and Toyota is so great at championing research and development and those types of funds that can bring the next generation to a more safe vehicle. So watching that unfold was really, really incredible. Another one that comes up for me is PenFed Credit Union. It's the second largest credit union here in the United States. And their CMO came to me and said, they're in motorsports with a female race car driver of mine by the name of Sabra Cook. They knew the power of the female influence over home buying and car buying. And they really wanted to reach out to those women and help them understand their power in finance and just what's out there, and just the education for the young women. And telling those stories through Sabra Cook has been really meaningful. But they also called me and said, what do you know about women's soccer? And I said, well, let me go find out. And so they are now branching off into different female-centric sports based on results, based on really using my company, PowerDrive, to navigate their way into those spaces that they have never been before. So whenever you bring a brand in that's never been in the space before, never had a female race car driver that they partner with, or getting into female centric sports, when you have the ones that have never done it before and you get them, that feels really good and very
Yeah.
meaningful for me.
And I imagine the education that comes with that needs to be quite structured and quite bespoke in order to take them on that journey, to fuel that fire, because there is, in the United States, obviously a much larger country than Australia, but there is a lot of different sporting opportunities for a lot of companies to engage in. And I imagine it can be quite overwhelming when somebody says, look, we need to get into women's sport. And everyone goes, yes, I agree. And it's like, so what sport? And it's like, how many sports do you want to pick from? Like, there's a lot of things to choose from out there. When somebody thinks about or brings to you this idea of starting in women's sport, how long is it often for them to go, we've now locked in on a particular realm of sport, compared to, we've come to you, look, we want to get into football and we've already got high conviction around that. Is there a difference in timing between when people start to understand what the sport is they're going to lock in on compared to others?
It's a long road. I'm going to tell you it's a long road, because so many are saying just that. I know we need to get into women's sports, but they have no idea where to start.
Right.
So what I do every day is curate relationships, authentic relationships that are honest, transparent, and built on movement. So I'm constantly nudging, showing them the way, not hard selling, going, hey, I'm going to share with you this report today that just came out from Parity or Wasserman or another data company, and show you this is why you need to invest in women's sports. So we know why. We know you need to do it. So now how do you do it? So it's very easy in a corporation to get caught up with, okay, we have these objectives, but we're working on these 4 things, and we'll get to that. Another unfortunate task that I need to, or perception I need to flip around, is a lot of times especially the larger corporations, these types of opportunities go down the hall to the corporate responsibility department, who has a very tiny budget and can't do much. So there's a lot of hurdles, but it's a lot of organizational skills, and it's a lot of communication skills on my part. It's really reminding them, remember, we need to invest in, women's sports. And then it's really getting the face-to-face. It's going to the company. It's meeting everyone. It's shaking everyone's hand. It's looking at everyone's eyes and saying, let's look at your goals. Let's look at your objectives for the next year or two. And then what I do is I find what fits best for that.
Right.
And I learn about them. What are they passionate about? What are their interests? You could get a CEO that has a daughter who plays soccer, or you've got to find what we have in common and then build off of that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm always fascinated when companies decide to take it to their staff and to have surveys done to help understand what the prevailing sentiment is, which is often very, very useful to do, but can be quite paralyzing on the other side of that as well, when you find that there is such a broad spread that you were hoping that there would be actually more signal around what the direction should be. But I think there is massive value in organizations saying, look, if we could support sport that is local, and we have one of the banks in Australia that has done for many years now, nearly 20 years, a fantastic job in junior football and different type of football. And now that brand is synonymous with Australian Football League, the AFL, because they do such a great job at the grassroots level for boys and girls. And it has just become hardwired in the Australian psyche that brand equals that sport. And it's very difficult to find a different way. But there was an interview made recently where the person who was responsible for the start of that deal really had to pioneer and put a lot of reputation capital on the line to get that through the organization, to make sure that everyone felt comfortable about it. Fortunately, the home state of that sport is where this bank is, so it made it a little bit easier, but it was certainly no done deal when the idea was first floated.
Yeah, and it's definitely, it's about really feeling confident and taking a risk.
Yep.
And now, like you said, that bank is known for that. And that is about consistency and really, really doing. You can't go in for a year or two. You can't go in. When you make the decision, you go all in, you double down, you triple down through thick and thin. Through the tough times, you stay there and you stay consistent. That's how you really, really capture the audience and the fans and the consumer.
So on the other side of this equation, we've got the athletes, and in the vast majority of cases, we see athletes at national championships. We see them at the Olympics, in our case, the Commonwealth Games, national competitions. And being a former athlete, I don't think people really understand that their sustainability, in other words, their capacity to live and pay bills, is heavily, heavily tied to either them working and then trying to find time to train, or vice versa, and sponsorships or support from organizations. What is the normal everyday life of the athletes that you work with, cultivate, develop, and the ones that are at that more professional level? What is it like for them? So we can just sort of shine a light on that part, because it does show just how much this kind of support and drive is required.
So I recently, as recent as this morning, saw a report from Parity that they asked, 800 female athletes or something like that. And they said 88% of these women, these female athletes across different disciplines, said that a $20,000 sponsorship would be life-changing. Okay,
wow.
So
wow.
There is a huge gap. And when we see women's sports and the growth, like we talked about, the explosive growth, now the income gap needs to be looked at, because, we have Caitlin Clark, we have, Serena Williams, we have, Osaka, we have women that are doing very well. But there are so many women, like you look at Naomi Girma, who is arguably the best defender in women's football, soccer. And I go, she should be making a lot of money, and it's just not happening. And I don't understand that. Alex Morgan, another one, was 2023. She was the most marketable female athlete in the world. And, she has, great partnerships, I'm sure, but she should be right up there. I think she was, so it was LeBron James, Messi, and Alex Morgan. Okay. She's not even chipping away at what LeBron James or Messi's making. So there's a huge gap there. And I think that, I wish I was an army of people, of me, doing this every day. I'm one person. I'm chipping away at it as much as I can every day, but there is a huge gap that needs to be filled. And I think, here in the United States, a lot of this is run by big sports agencies. And, they're all about numbers, and it's like, they need to be more about people.
Yeah.
And, they do contracts. They go where the money's flowing. It's where's the next trend. And what I like to do is I like to find the diamonds in the rough and shine them.
I love that. When you think about where your business started, our research suggests that it started inside a global pandemic. It does feel like it was a long time ago, but we're all still feeling, I think, the trails of that impact. Starting a business in any case, and particularly one which is so partnership driven, is often very tricky if you can't get to the people to have the conversations to get to be known. So tell me about that, because I when I saw that in the research, I deeply empathized with that. What was that journey like for you?
God, getting to the people. And I had to shed a lot of ego, a lot of self, a lot of just to be vulnerable like that. I will literally follow someone in the bathroom. If I'm like, I have an opportunity to talk to this person, what's the worst that could happen? Right? I will follow them into the bathroom. And it doesn't always work out. But at least you tried. And I try to
Mm.
teach my daughter that every day. You know, you're going to get doors shut in your face. You're going to
Yeah.
get people that don't like you. And I always tell her, I'm not for everyone. You're not for everyone. But when you are very passionate about what you're doing, I think even the meanest people can appreciate it. Um, you know, it might not be the right fit, but at least you tried. And I believe that what you put out, you get back. It might
Mm.
not be from this channel, it might not be from that lane, but it'll be from somewhere else, because what you ultimately put out, you will get back. And you know, you just reminded me of when I started my company and how that came about, and just how treacherous it really was at that time, because the schools were closed. My daughter was 20 feet away from me in homeschool. And
Yeah. I remember
I
those
said,
times.
well, the world has stopped. I've really always wanted to do this, and, you know, build these bridges for women and fill these gaps, and take the plunge into my own business. And when I decided to do that, something clicked, and I was never turning back. I was only looking forward.
Hmm.
And looking back, my daughter was a big part of that, because
Yeah.
she's sitting 30 feet away from me, and locked in locked in together for 18 months. It
Yeah.
was a really long time. And I remember every Friday at 5 o'clock, I would just go in the bathroom and cry and let it all out. And then I just pick myself up and I keep going. And I look back, and I like to share the message with people I mentor, that adversity is opportunity,
Hmm.
and growth hurts. Like, you know how
Yeah.
you have growing pains when you're
Hmm.
a young
Oh, yeah.
child, you have them when you're older too. And they just feel and look a little different, but it's all the same. And it doesn't feel good when you're in that moment. But when you look back at it, you go, wow, I am stronger and smarter and more formidable than I could have ever imagined. And I wish
Without
that
doubt.
for others.
Yeah. Without doubt. Um, and congratulations on what you're building here. I think it's quite something. Before we keep going, just tell people where they can go to learn more about you, so that we can get people in that conversation with you. Where should they go?
Oh gosh, I'm on socials at PowerDriveMF, on X, Instagram, and my website, www.powerdrivemf.com. And I like Instagram, so DM me.
Excellent. No, it's good. We're across each of those. We'll put those in the show notes, and also in what we release here. When we think about the idea of organizations coming into women's
Mm.
sport, and there's this idea of we should get into it, and they're thinking about it potentially, I'm not suggesting this happens all the time, but through a gender lens as opposed to commercial opportunity. There is obviously a mountain of evolving data that shows that there is a huge wave to be ridden, and the benefits of riding that wave are so positive for not just sport, not just for generational change, not just for the athletes, but right across the board. How do you position that with new brands so that they're not looking at such a large number that they go, I'm sort of being beaten by this big number? It's more about, you know, it's very difficult to lose
I think the
if
first
we come
step
into
is
this.
showing up. It's going to a football match. It's going to a
Mm.
WNBA game. It's looking at the attendance and how it's grown, and the energy in the building, and just showing up and seeing your customers sitting in seats. That's the first step.
Mm.
And then the
Yeah.
other thing is, you're going to have so much fun. These athletes are incredible. The
Mm.
adversity that they have gone through to train and to be there, and to basically what they've gone through just to be there and to become a professional, is different than men. It's different.
Yeah.
It's not any,
I agree.
I think male athletes are incredible. I love NFL football. I'm there for it. I love it. But the women have those stories and have the same challenges. And there's actually so much in common when you look at it. The life stories that you hear about in the NFL and the NBA, in men's sports, and you look at the female athletes coming up who are now professional, they have stories to tell too that people want to hear. And I see a
Mm.
lot of cross pollination in that here in the United States, where I'll go to a San Diego Wave game here in San Diego, and you'll have, guys from the Padres coming over and, supporting the women and vice versa. And they're like, "Oh my God, I had no idea this was so awesome." And,
Mm.
we've never had the opportunity or never thought of coming to an event like this. And it's mind blowing. Thank you for having us. And so
Yeah.
I think working in collaboration with professional men has been a huge hit. And I think just
Mm.
getting these CEOs and these people out to women's sporting events and then seeing all their customers who paid a ticket to be there need to have the presence there, they'll see it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you think about what another one of those commercial benefits is, you see a lot of former fighter pilots going into the world of business and talking about the fighter pilot
Mhm.
mindset. You also then find when it looks at athletes, which I don't think is done as well as it could be, the athlete mindset. So the process that all athletes go through, but specifically for women and what they do to prepare for every day, how they show up, how they often don't want to go, but they still go. All the things that they have to overcome, which are so transferable to somebody who is not an athlete, but is running hard in life, spinning all of the plates, trying to make it all work. I feel as though there is something about that transference which we could all probably do a lot better job of helping women understand from a female athlete's point of view.
Absolutely. I think mindset, motivational speaking, being relatable is another huge asset for an athlete. I mean, if you look at, is it
Mm.
Iona Nair or Mayer? Can't say her name right. I'm so sorry.
Hmm.
Rugby player. Everybody knows her, and everybody probably knows how to
Right.
say her name correctly. I've never been able to do it, but you look at somebody like her, and so, like however she connects to the people is so relatable, and people want to
Right.
feel like they're a part of something, and she has the talent and the gift to be able to do that. So what her
Mm.
messaging is, your body is beautiful, keep it healthy and strong, you can do whatever you want in the world, don't let anybody tell you how to be yourself. These are the types of motivational messages I would want my daughter to hear, right? And so
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
also think it's important, and some of the most successful female athletes, when we talk about mindset, they don't have a victim mentality. They don't have it.
Hmm.
And I
Yep.
think that there's a shortcoming in the messaging from some organizations that are telling women that they're less than, or that they're not getting what they deserve, and all these other things.
Mm.
And when you tell somebody that, that's what they believe about themselves, in my opinion.
Yep.
When
I'm with you.
we keep it
Yep.
positive and say, "Hey, you might have a really crappy training facility, but guess what? The girls in Africa don't even have that." And some of the best
Hmm.
football players, female football players coming into the NWSL right now, are from Africa, and they are insanely
Yep.
good. You know why?
Hmm.
Because they played with
That's right.
boys. They didn't have any other choice. They didn't have girls' soccer leagues. They played with boys. So I transfer that now into uh, female race car drivers. They need to be racing
Hmm.
against men that have more seat time than them, that have what they're trying to obtain, right? You got to keep
Mm.
challenging yourself. You got to be racing against men. And, then we get into the controversial conversation of the F1 Academy. And I love Susie Wolf, but I get what she's trying to do. But it's not doing, as an athlete, any service to any of these female race car drivers to be racing in F4 cars with other girls. It's not going to,
Mm.
the minute you
Mm.
put them in an F2 or an F3 with all boys, it's a different animal. And so that's
Yeah.
unfortunate, but all I can do is what I can do. Here in the United States, we don't have an
Yeah.
all-female championship, thank God, not yet. We're all praying it doesn't happen here,
Hmm.
because women and men can compete with each other in motorsport. There's no difference in their ability to do that. So we don't want to segregate women from men. And that's, a lot of my colleagues are championing for integrating the women in with the men.
Yeah, and look, there are so many different parallels to that, right? When you look at the way that women aviators play a role in the military, particularly in the US, extraordinary levels of expertise on display on the ground and in the air, where they are in charge and leading squadrons. They are flying exactly the same airframe as their male colleagues, and they are doing a pretty damn good job at that job as well. And they're very well accepted. It had to start somewhere, and there are many stories when women started to fly. For example, in the Navy, the F-14 Tomcat, where it was a very controversial decision. It had to start somewhere, and they were the ones that really paved the way. And then you look fast forward to today, you see women in every kind of airframe, and it's accepted. But it was a journey to get there, and I think it would be a travesty for people not to look at those living, working, well-established examples, and not accept that it can't be done. I think there would be.
We've come a long way, but there's still a long way to go. And 2025 is coming up, and I look back at my life and go, this is only how far we are, though, and that's tough to swallow. But it's like, what a time to be alive, to be able to be a part of the change and to leave, like, what's your legacy at the end of the day? When you put in, more than 20 years into something, it's like, what did it all mean? What am I leaving for the next? I'm going to leave it a little better for the next,
Absolutely. Let's sort of project that optimism further forward. Let's imagine the best case scenario that you can possibly imagine, given your vantage point. Let's go 20 years in the future. What does this look like from a women in sport corporate partner, supporter kind of thing? What are some of the characteristics you're saying to people when you're saying, back in 2024, when this was just starting and we were starting to get started, this is what it was like, here's where we are now. What would you love to see in 20 years' time?
Well, hopefully I will be eating cheese on a balcony overlooking the sea in Monaco or something. Hopefully that's what I'll be doing, and I'll be, looking on my tablet, and, the Monaco GP will be coming through, and there'll be, a handful of women racing in that. That would be really, really awesome. God, 20 years from now, I'll say, I remember that. I remember her. Oh, that's her daughter now, right? Like, oh, her daughter's doing that. And I mean, wow, talk about opening up a can of worms. I'm imagining a lot, and I'm imagining, can you believe that in 2024, 2025, there were no women there? And now, because of the work of me and others like me, we made it easier for their daughters and their daughters. And I think it's important to also know that the women that came before me, Lynn St. James, Danica Patrick, right? It's been almost 20 years since Danica Patrick led laps in the Indy 500, which has never been done by a woman before her nor after. So, I'm hoping at that point there's a woman's face on the Borg Warner Trophy in the IndyCar museum. I got to chill. So maybe that's going to happen. But there's so many things that can be accomplished, and so many awesome historical moments that still haven't happened yet. And to be a tiny little part of that is I have so much gratitude.
That's amazing. Tami, I'm going to get into our rapid fire to close this conversation out. So are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Question number 1. Complete this sentence. Partnership is
paramount.
What content are you loving at the moment?
Real life family stories.
What's the worst piece of advice you've received, and why?
Oh God. Oh, just be quiet and listen.
Yes.
You might learn
That
something.
is a
Yeah.
terrible piece of advice. That's a terrible piece of advice. When you see potential for a new partnership, what's the first thing you do to turn that potential into action?
Learn their business.
Clever. And finally, and I get in trouble for this often, I can give you 3 instead of just 1, but what's one thing you're deeply grateful for right now?
My health.
Everything's
Yeah.
built on it. Amazing. Tami, we are going to link everything in the show notes for this conversation. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing, for the mission that you're progressing. I think it's really quite something. And I hope that there's a way for us to collaborate in the future. I think there is such enormous potential across the board, and it's a universal problem. So for the people who are listening to this, who are in leadership roles and they're contemplating this idea of bringing their organizations closer to women's sport, Tami is somebody you should be speaking to. So please reach out to her and have a conversation, whether it's for something in the US or not. I think there is just this body of knowledge that is very transferable and very valuable. So thank you for giving me the time today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's Phil, and thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode of Partnership Plus. If you're one of the 61% of people who have discovered this episode and you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please go ahead and do that. The bigger the channel, the bigger the guests. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next episode.